Welcome back to Should Have Listened to My Mother, a podcast where we share stories of our relationship with our mom. What was your relationship like with your mother? Was your mother present in your life? Was she your biggest idol or your nemesis? Are you who you are today because of or in spite of your mother? Thanks for being such loyal listeners. Please download or subscribe wherever you can. You can find us all over social media, wherever you listen to podcasts. At a young age, my guest was thinking of becoming a vet. Her mother suggested becoming a journalist. Today, Randee Dawn is an author, longtime lifestyle and entertainment writer who recently released a new book titled The Only Song We're Singing, based on Irish mythology. It's an amalgam of different periods of her life, including working as a journalist in the music industry, traveling, and dreaming. Years ago, Randee hiked Hadrian's Path in northern England. She has a gold record from the band Radiohead, and she is here to tell us about her adoptive mother, Lois. As an adoptee, Randee places high value on the notion of found family, and I can't wait to hear the rest of the story. Hi, Randee. Thanks for joining me on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. This is terrific. I'm really excited to be here.
So before we started recording, which is kind of the golden nuggets of these conversations, we have similar backgrounds, the two of us working in the music industry. And if we have time later, we perhaps will share some things that we have in common. But you have a wonderful perspective on your relationship with your mother and your family. You say, just because I wasn't conceived by my mom, my parents, doesn't mean that she's not my mother or that we can bond with this individual. So I believe you grew up in Baltimore. I know you're in Brooklyn, New York now. Tell me a little bit about what Lois was like. Is she still with us?
She is still with us. I'm actually going to visit her next week.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I wasn't quite born in Baltimore, a little bit closer to DC. It's known as the Montgomery County area, but it's Maryland. It all counts. We're a small state.
Okay.
Yeah. So growing up with my mom was just, she's always been my biggest fan. She's always been the person who's there for me. I don't want to paint it like some sort of Norman Rockwell thing. It's not as though we never had our differences or saw things differently, but she's the one. And again, some of these are stories that come from her telling me as opposed to me natively remembering.
Sure.
But the mythology goes like this. And by mythology, I mean, as I understand it. So I was adopted at like 3 days. And so there's no memory as a child of a biological parent, right? And I was taken from Norfolk, where I was born, Norfolk in Virginia, to Maryland, where I grew up. And when I was quite young, she told me later that she used to play this. It's sort of a game, but it's not really a game, where she would say, "Okay, so who are you?" And my name is Randee. Oh, I'm got blonde hair, and oh, I'm Jewish, and oh, I'm adopted. And this was just like one of the characteristics that I had that was as much about me as my blonde hair or the fact what my name was. And she never had a background in psychology, but I've always thought of this as a really brilliant psychological technique, because if you don't make it an alien concept, if it's not an alien concept, then by the time you need to ask what it means, it's not foreign, right? It's just another thing about you. So I knew this. There was never a big moment where I was of a certain age, and they broke the news to me, and it was tragic, and it was horrible, and I ran out of the house, and all these dramatic things you see in movies and TV, right?
Yeah.
Many years later, when I was in college, I roomed with 2 women who had known each other since they were very young. They grew up in the same neighborhood, and they were both adopted. And
wow, that's interesting.
They told me their story, which was when they were about 7 or 8, their parents got them ice cream, sat them in the back of the car, and turned around and said, "By the way," and all I can think of is, "Thank you, Mom, for not making this not
a stigma.
Just a stigma, not a tragedy, but actually just something that was as normal as anything else, right? I mean, most people are not adopted, so technically it's not normal.
Right.
But normalizing adoption has been really an important part of my life, because when you are adopted, you can interpret it in a lot of different ways. But the way I always interpreted it was a way for me to sort of look at how other people related to their families, and how much emphasis so many people put on blood relation. Oh, I have to do this thing because she's my sister.
Yeah, but
Or
that can also get you in trouble too, right?
precisely, this is not necessarily in your best interest, right?
Right.
But, and I watched a lot of soap operas. Okay, I even wrote for a soap
Mhm.
opera magazine for a time, and the emphasis those shows would put on, it's like, I hate that person, but wait, I'm suddenly related to her, now I need to give her everything. It's like, no, this is
Right.
not how people really interact. And it always sort of interested me that, we call the found family right now, and maybe that phrase has been around a long time, but it's reasonably new in my mind. I just knew that from an early age, just because you were blood related to somebody didn't mean you necessarily had to have a stronger emotional connection to them,
Connection.
because I didn't know who I was blood related to, but my family, the people I was most connected to, were very
Loved
important to
you.
me and loved me, right? So that doesn't directly address the mother situation, but mom was my primary person in this scenario. Dad was he was around, but he was sort of just not engaged, not interested, not
Even
really.
today.
He is no longer with us. He
Okay.
passed when I was in college. Um,
But
but
you had your
he,
mom.
but I had my mom, exactly, and it also, because I had her, I was able to look at her as, there's a way to role model somebody. I admired her for so many things, but there are also some choices and things that she did that I said to myself, I don't want to do those things because I see how they affected her. So this is
Well,
not
my
meant to.
boys probably have a long list of things and every mother of
Exactly.
what I'm not going to do much. She tried to throw me out of the house, whatever it is.
Right. There's many things that but I think people
Got
can be a role
wrong.
model. Right. Well, yeah. But even if you don't get it wrong, it's like, I grew up in the 70s, and women were still not really able to get a no fault divorce. It was not easy to
Mm,
separate from whoever you
yeah.
were married to. And she had to do a lot of work out of the house when this was really still kind of an early thing for women to be doing, right? Um, and I just observed how stressful that was for her. I went and saw her office. She had an office with no windows, and she had put a picture of a window on the wall. And like that just
Oh, that's really cool. What line of
that
work was she in?
we since we were in like the DC area, there was a lot of government contractor type work.
Sure.
So every 5 years or so, when a new contract showed up, she'd get a new editing job. So she did writing and
Great.
editing for government contracts. But I just remember visiting her in her office and seeing how sort of monotonous it was, and seeing
Mm,
how, like, it's very heartwarming that she put a window on the wall when there was no window, but at the same time it's really very sad at the same
right.
time. And that's kind of an example of something she did, and she had to do it, and I get why she had to do it, and I'm not in any way saying that this was a bad choice for her, but I knew it wasn't going to be my choice.
Did she ever want to remarry? Were
Um,
they divorced, your parents?
they
They were
did
divorced.
divorce eventually,
But did she
yeah.
ever meet anyone new?
She did actually. She
Mm,
didn't date
that's
a
good.
lot while we were still in the house, which was another thing in retrospect I really admired her for. There weren't like a succession of, oh, here's Uncle Dave, you have to pretend like he's your maybe next daddy. We just did
Because
not
you
have
need a
that.
man. You need a
Right.
man.
No, that was that, and that was just not that was not the case. It's not that she never dated anybody, but it was so either on the down low or not in front of us or didn't come to the house that it just didn't feel like she was dating anybody. And
Right.
then after I was in college, somebody she had worked with years before moved back to town, because this is the nature of like government contracting, and you're always going where the job is. And he needed a place to stay, and I wasn't there anymore. My brother was in college, and she was like, well, this is extra money. And then like they just connected. I mean, he always had a thing
Oh,
for
good
her.
for her. Oh,
Um,
that's so cool. That's great.
and yeah, it was very cute. My brother called me, and he's just like, Randee, I think mom and Larry are, like, I think they might be dating. And I'm just like, she will let you know when she wants you to know.
Yeah. Is your
Um,
brother adopted as well?
no, no, he's biological. He came along. It was the classic sort of like, we can't have a kid. We must do something about this. Let's adopt. And then when the
Wait.
pressure's off,
Yeah,
yeah, he came along about not
naturally.
quite 3 years later, but soon, he's a little younger than I am.
And have you ever inquired about your biological mom? Do you know the backstory or anything?
When I was in college, I petitioned the local government because the thing is, the adoption was finalized in Virginia, but then I was living in Maryland and I had to figure out where the paperwork all sat. And I petitioned for non identifying information. And I got a little bit of this, and I'm like, oh, mother didn't graduated high school and then did this sort of thing, or mother, like very, again, non identifying information. And yeah, that's sort of the information that I ended up getting.
So, what about your mom? Did she ever push you to connect with your mom, your biological mom?
She really hasn't. When she moved out of Maryland to a different state for various reasons, when there was the big clean out of all of her stuff, I did get the adoption paperwork, and she just wasn't interested in knowing if I went somewhere, whether I went anywhere with that. I think that um, she still has a very strong emotional attachment to, I am your mother, which she is. I have never made her feel anything other than. I've never referred
Mhm.
to another person as, well, there's a real mother out there. That's another thing that bugs me too, is when people talk about adoptees as having real mothers. It's like, the real mother is the one who raises
It's
you.
the one that took you and loved you and held you and caressed you and fed you and listened to you and comforted you.
Exactly,
That's a
exactly.
mom.
And that to me is the real definition of motherhood.
Yeah.
So
Did you get
yes.
teased? Did you ever get teased in school?
No, I really didn't. It's not something like there's a button you wear and you go in and it's like,
Yeah,
this is
but
the adopted kid. But
kids can be
um,
so nasty. They find any bit of information. I've spoken to people in
yeah.
it, and it's something that they either hide
Hmm.
or, like you said, it's not even an issue, which I think
Yeah.
is brilliant.
It's not something I lead with. It's something
Right.
that I will tell people eventually. But I would say that probably the vast majority of people who I'm not close to don't necessarily know this, not because I'm hiding it, just because it hasn't come up.
No, it
What
doesn't make a
has
difference.
Right, it doesn't make a difference to me. And I think there's two things here, which is I have sort of the complexion and fair hair of my brother, who is not biologically related to me, and he has like the facial, he facially reflects my mother. So this is not an example of, the milkman's daughter, right? Like, I kind of look like I could fit into this particular household. Whereas going back to my friends when I was in college, these two girls who knew each other since they were kids, one of them had beautiful, gorgeous red hair and big, big green eyes and an Italian last name. And I was like, that's a tough one. That's a slightly different conversation she has probably had over the years.
But, well, we're fortunate because we're talking about this now in 2025,
Yeah.
when decades ago, as all topics, they could have been controversial or, something to be ashamed of and all that.
Right.
So,
Adoptions are much more open, I think, these
yeah,
days. People are more comfortable with the idea of why someone has to be adopted.
but
It's
it's
not.
saving a baby's life
I
from
agree.
someone who's unable to care. That's another definition of mom.
Right. And my
Yeah.
biological mother, I have nothing but respect for her because I never looked at it as in like, oh, she threw you away. I looked at it as in there was a reason, for whatever the reason was in her life at that time, that she could not raise me, and she did her best to find a household that could.
I can only imagine how hard that is to
I
give your
can't. Yeah.
baby.
Same
So
here.
that's, it takes a lot to put
Yeah.
their baby's life and future in front and,
People you
as the
never met.
beginning. Yeah, people that you
Yeah.
never met. Wow, you also, and this ties in with your book,
Hmm.
the power of friendships, how meaningful they are.
Yeah.
Um, are you and Lois friends? You and your mom, do you consider yourselves friends?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, as I said before, she's my best cheerleader. I can talk to her about anything. I think age is making that a little more challenging because
Mm.
our memories are not what they used to be. Let's put it that way.
At least you put the two of you together in that hour.
Yeah,
Unless
exactly.
it's primarily hers.
So yeah, like I say, she's always there for me. She's the one who, I have this book coming out, and she's the one who goes around her community, her 55 and older community, and just basically tells everybody, "Hey, my daughter has a book
Here's
coming
my
out."
daughter's book.
That's right. She's one of my best salespeople. So
Oh, that's the best.
absolutely. And I dedicated. This is not my first book, but I did dedicate my first book to her.
Yeah, you do have a number of books, and this one you go back to the only song worth singing. It's your passion for Irish heritage and music, and I love how people always say, God, when I was in my teens or my early 20s, I had all these odd jobs. I'm telling you, I've never appreciated all those, whether it's waiting tables or working in radio. They have always come through for me in the future. And you bundled all of your experience in this, which is really fantastic. So no one should ever poo-poo what jobs their kids have or what they themselves have, because it's a learning experience. And that's what I love about it. I love about it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think parents are just concerned that they want you to have a stable enough job
Sure.
at some point so that you can support yourself, right? But I think 20s were terrible. I really did not like my 20s. I was just,
Oh,
I didn't have
really? Oh,
no
dear.
stability. Yeah, there were parts that I liked. It wasn't like 10 years of this is terrible, but I did a lot of freelancing work. I did a lot of temp work. I just didn't know where I was going with myself. And, um, it's when the parents, say to you, when are you going to get a job, when are you going to do something. I never
Oh,
really heard that from my mom, which was terrific. She knew that I was supporting myself. I would make it work somehow. If I needed to, I could have come home, but I really didn't want to have to do that. I wanted to be on my own. But I always knew that she had my back if I needed it.
I know you talked about possibly thinking of becoming a vet when you were young, but you
Yeah.
couldn't stand the shots and things. What other career do you think you would have pursued had your mom not suggested journalism
Um,
track?
I really don't
Writing
know,
is,
because
you seem to be great at writing.
the thing is, I was writing already. So what happened
Yeah,
was, when I discovered that veterinary medicine was not for me, and truly in eighth grade, maybe I was making a premature decision. But when I
as
decided
we
it
all
was
do.
right, it's like, oh, no, I gotta do that. She just asked what I liked to do. And I told her that I
Yes.
liked writing. And this was both a supportive and a savvy answer to say journalism, because fiction writing does not pay well. And not that journalism pays a whole lot better, but journalism is like, there's a chance you're going to get a salary at some point.
Sure.
So,
I've freelanced my whole life for the most part. And excuse me, you got to figure out how you can balance. You got to have something coming in, right? As you're doing all the other odd jobs and piecing
exactly.
things together.
So,
I
yeah.
would love for you to tell us about, because you have two books, you have another book coming out in
Correct.
2025. So
Yes.
The Only Songs We're Singing is the book that recently came out in April of 2025, correct?
That's right. Yes.
And you talk about the supernatural beings, and the three guys that were friends,
Mm-hmm.
and then they got into music. So tell us a little bit about, so my listeners know, because I have a better idea than they do as of now. So fill them in. I also work part-time at my local library, so
Ooh,
always
okay.
looking for great books.
Yeah, I was going to say, recommend this book to be carried by your library. Um,
Will do.
yeah, so we have three guys who've been best friends since they were young, and what really brought them together was music in the first place. Like, they just were natural musicians who just created sort of this whole vibe, and created sort of a sense of security by playing music. Um, and when they grew up, they formed a band, as you do, and then the band actually got a little bit of notice, and then they got signed to a contract. And a couple chapters in, after we've met them for a minute or two, we skip ahead, and the guys are grown up, and they're on their first tour in America. And what they don't realize is that they have been pursued by these Irish mythological characters, these Sidhe, which means she, Sidhe, means fairy in Irish. And three of them had followed them to the Americas and are basically like there to turn their lives upside down and make things crazy. And one of them is based on this fairy mistress character that Yeats wrote about in this collection of Irish fairy and folk tales that he put together. And this fairy mistress character she inspires the poets. She, creates this ability to write amazing poetry, but she slowly saps the life out of you at the same time, which is why the poets die young. Has nothing to do with drinking too much. So when I was thinking about like marrying these two concepts, I was like, who are modern day poets, rock stars? Okay. So the question with the book becomes, once you've attracted the attention of the Fae, how do you get rid of them before they kill you?
Oh my gosh, that's intense, because those fairies are pretty smart. They're savvy.
They have magic, but they don't realize we might have our own kind of magic.
There you go. And then what is the name of the book? I have the next book that's coming out this year.
Right. So the next book that's coming out, it'll be out in August. Okay. And that one's called Leave No Trace. And it also incorporates musical characters and Gallic folklore characters. So this is more of when you say Gallic, you're really referring more to the Scots side of things as opposed to the Irish. And there's a character in there that is known as the Gilly Dhu. The Gilly Dhu is known as the green man of the forest. It's a creature who lives in the forest and takes care of it and looks after the animals and so forth. And usually looks a bit like he's made of a piece of the forest. He'll wear grass and twigs and things.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and so he's a character who interacts with these musicians who show up in the forest. And then there's a third element where there's a young woman who is kind of one of our main characters who has grown up in the forest. Her father is like one of these crazy off the grid guys, and he took his kids and said, "We're not going to live with all the the modern mod cons and civilization. We're going to live in the woods and we're going to make this work." And she has basically grown up that way. So when she meets all these different characters, a lot of strange things are going on. And there is a loose connection to The Only Song Worth Singing, but they are both standalone books. The only way you would know there's a connection is if I get to write the third book.
Oh, well, I hope you do. Now, what reading age range are these?
I wouldn't say too young. I think, over, say, 15, 16, but definitely adult.
Young adult enough.
Yeah, there's some swearing. There's a little violence. The sex that comes into the first one, because we have a fairy mistress character, it's not explicit, but we acknowledge the existence of sex as
good to know for parents. Parents like to know that information.
Right. So it's not explicit. You're not getting a lot of descriptions and all of that. It's not erotica, but that is a motivating plot point. The characters in Leave No Trace, there's not really, that is not really.
Wow. Okay, terrific. And you also are teaching classes.
Right.
And I wanted you to talk about that too.
Yeah, so I took a lot.
6 lessons, 6 classes.
Exactly. Creative Coaching Partners and I paired up, and they are creating all of these modules for people who are trying to break into the entertainment industry or enhance their skills in the entertainment industry. And as you know, interviewing is a skill. And you and I, many others have done this for many, many years. I've been an entertainment journalist for many years. I've talked to thousands of people. And I wanted to help people who had something to sell. Oh, I've got a project, I've got a widget, I've got a movie, I've got a book. How do I talk to the press? How can I make this work for me?
Great.
So I think a lot of people sit down and say, oh, it's just a matter of talking. But actually, it's a whole structure. It's a whole way of getting your point across. It's about becoming somebody they want to invite back later. Oh, this person was so interesting that even though they don't have a new thing out, we want to talk to them. Kind of thing.
It's interesting that you say that, because you're going into, whether it's trying to sell a book or promote yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm usually doing the interviewing, I'm also curious as to who that being is or that person is. More than just the product they're trying to sell, right? Or how you came about. How did you create this idea? What was your mother like? Whatever.
I call myself a nosy Parker. I just I want to ask all the questions. People are so interesting, right?
But you have to remember that to try and and be as calm and relaxed going into a situation like this, so you are your true self, not just those talking points that someone told you to memorize that you need to get out,
Right, exactly. And, for
They're
example,
important.
they are, absolutely. But one of the things I talk about in the course, for example, is the importance of the anecdote. And I think when you're talking to somebody and you're interviewing them, it's very easy to just get direct, straight answers, right? Which are fine. That's the information you need. But the color comes from a good, well-told anecdote that goes to the point of what you're trying to make. And if that's the kind of thing people don't think about, and they ought to prepare themselves a little bit ahead of time in case it comes up, right? So
I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's just like one element of it all. So
okay,
yeah.
So how do people find the classes?
Oh goodness.
Or the conversation, creative coaching partners.
Creative coaching partners, and then I'm sure that we can provide a link.
I'll put it all in my show notes for anyone who wants this information.
Exactly. And I am promoting it on my social media. And if you reach out to me and say you can't find it, I will be very happy to share with you whatever the link is. But I think if you Google creative coaching partners and my name, it will all come up.
And you're on social media as, and Randee, you spell your name Randee.
Correct.
Randee
yes.
Dawn.
Yeah.
Not with a Y. Randee Dawn. Randee Dawn. You can find her on everything: Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and your website, randeedawn.com.
Yes.
Yay.
I'm very findable.
Which is great. Why not make it easy for people to find us?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. New book just recently released, April 2025. The only song we're singing, thank you so much, is Please Say Hi to Your Mom. Did she know you're doing this, having this conversation?
She doesn't, but she also doesn't listen to a lot of podcasts. So,
but I'm curious, would she be comfortable knowing that you were talking about her or not? You won't even bring it up.
I think she'd be okay with it. I might mention it to her, and if she wants to listen, I will definitely get her a copy of it. But
tell her we all say hi.
Thank you, and hi to your mom. I don't know if she's still with us, but hi to your mom.
She's right here in my studio with me. Oh. She's celestial. She's around me all day long.
All right, hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.